The fluorescent lights of Courtroom 3B hummed above rows of wooden benches, casting harsh shadows across faces frozen in anticipation. Judge Margaret Chen sat elevated behind her mahogany bench, her reading glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed the case file one final time. The air tasted of old paper and anxiety. In the gallery's front row, 8-year-old Emma Morrison sat motionless between her foster mother and a victim advocate, her small hands folded in her lap. She wore a purple dress, her favorite color, though the brightness seemed wrong for the heaviness pressing down on her narrow shoulders. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, revealing a face that had learned to show nothing at all. Across the aisle, Emma's biological father, Marcus Morrison, sat rigid in an expensive suit that his lawyer had insisted upon. His jaw was tight, his eyes fixed on the judge, carefully avoiding his daughter's direction. 3 rows behind him, his mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, shaking her head in disbelief at the accusations that had brought them all here. But it was the dog lying beneath the witness stand that held the courtroom's collective attention. Rex, a 7-year-old German shepherd with a graying muzzle and amber eyes, rested his head on his paws in a perfect downstay position. His black and tan coat bore the shine of meticulous care. But closer inspection revealed old scars along his shoulders, marks from a past that had once broken him completely. A service dog vest wrapped around his chest, identifying him as a certified facility dog assigned to the county's Child Advocacy Center. Judge Chen had allowed Rex's presence over the defense attorney's objections, citing established precedent for emotional support animals in cases involving child witnesses. What she hadn't mentioned was that she'd been following Rex's story since his rescue 3 years ago, a case that had made local headlines when he'd been found chained in a basement, so traumatized he couldn't even be touched. The rehabilitation had taken months. A former military dog handler named Sarah Coleman, now working with the Advocacy Center, had spent countless hours sitting in silence with the damaged shepherd, never demanding, only offering. The breakthrough had come on a rain-soaked morning when Rex had finally taken 3 steps forward and pressed his scarred head against Sarah's knee. After that, everything changed. Rex seemed to understand trauma in a way that transcended species, perhaps because he carried his own. Within a year, had been certified as a facility dog, specializing in cases involving children who had experienced abuse. He didn't perform tricks or follow complex commands. His gift was simpler and more profound. He knew when someone was hurting, and he knew how to witness that hurt without judgment. Emma had met Rex 4 months ago, during her first forensic interview at the Advocacy Center. She'd sat frozen in the child-friendly room, unable to speak about what her father had done, unable even to cry. The interviewer had grown concerned about the girl's dissociative state when Rex, lying nearby, had simply stood, walked to Emma's chair, and placed his head in her lap. The dam had broken then. Emma's small hand had found the soft fur behind Rex's ears, and the story had come tumbling out in whispered fragments. Years of violence, control, and fear disguised behind the facade of a respected insurance executive and devoted father. Now, as the preliminary hearing entered its 3rd hour, the prosecutor stood to call her final witness. "Your Honor, the state calls Emma Morrison." The courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Judge Chen leaned forward, her expression softening despite decades of practiced neutrality. "Emma, honey, I need you to come sit at the witness stand. Rex can come with you if you'd like." Emma didn't move. Her foster mother, Janet Reeves, a woman with kind eyes and graying red hair, placed a gentle hand on the girl's shoulder. "It's okay, sweetheart. Rex will be right there with you. You're safe." Still, Emma remained frozen. Her eyes were locked on her father across the aisle, and in that gaze, Judge Chen recognized something she'd seen too many times in her 23 years on the bench. A child trapped between the truth she needed to tell and the loyalty she'd been conditioned to feel. Marcus Morrison stared back at his daughter, his expression unreadable but his jaw working slightly. To anyone watching closely, it might have looked like contained emotion. To Judge Chen, it looked like control. Sarah Coleman, Rex's handler, stood from her position near the witness stand. She was a woman in her early 40s, with salt and pepper hair cut short and the weathered look of someone who'd seen combat and come home changed. She didn't approach Emma directly, but instead made a subtle hand gesture toward Rex. The German Shepherd rose smoothly from his downstay and walked with measured steps toward Emma's seat. He didn't rush, didn't force his presence, but simply positioned himself beside her and sat, his shoulder aligned with her knees. Emma's right hand dropped from her lap and found Rex's head. Her fingers buried themselves in the thick fur at his neck, and she drew in a shaking breath. "I can do it," Emma whispered, so quietly that half the courtroom leaned forward to hear. "If Rex stays." "Rex will stay right beside you the whole time," Judge Chen assured her, gesturing to Sarah. "Miss Coleman will be there too. You're going to be just fine, Emma." The walk from her seat to the witness stand took less than 30 seconds but felt like crossing an ocean. Emma kept her hand in Rex's fur the entire way, and the dog moved with her in perfect synchronization, as if they'd rehearsed this dance though they never had. Sarah followed at a discreet distance. Once Emma was seated in the witness chair, Rex lay down beside her, positioning himself between Emma and the defense table, between Emma and her father. Sarah took a seat against the wall nearby, close enough to assist if needed but far enough to give them space. The court clerk administered the oath. Emma's voice was barely audible as she promised to tell the truth. Her hand never left Rex's head. The prosecutor, a woman named Rachel Tanaka, who specialized in child abuse cases, approached with a gentle expression. She'd learned over 15 years that the key to these testimonies was patience, letting the child set the pace, building trust incrementally. "Emma, I know this is scary," Rachel began, her voice warm, "but I want you to know that everyone in this room is here to listen to you and to help you. Can you start by telling us how old you are?" 8. The answer came out thin but clear. "And where do you live now, with Miss Janet?" "She's my foster mom." Emma's fingers worked through Rex's fur in a repetitive motion, finding rhythm in the softness. "That's right. And before you lived with Miss Janet, where did you live?" Emma's hand stilled. Her eyes dropped to Rex's face and the dog lifted his head slightly, amber eyes meeting brown. Something passed between them, a recognition, a reminder. "With my dad." Emma's voice had gotten smaller. "And my grandma sometimes." Rachel nodded encouragingly. "Emma, I need to ask you some questions about living with your dad. If you need to take a break at any time, you just tell Judge Chen, okay?" Emma nodded, but her breathing had quickened. Rachel noticed the shift and adjusted her approach. "Let's start with something easier. Can you tell me about a normal day when you lived with your dad? What would you do after school?" The questions continued, gentle and building. Emma answered in fragments, her voice wavering but persistent. She described her routine, her room, her school. Normal details that painted the picture of an ordinary childhood, except for what she wasn't saying, the gaps that spoke volumes to everyone listening. 30 minutes into the testimony, Rachel approached the crucial questions. "Emma, did there come a time when your dad would get angry with you?" Emma's entire body tensed. Her hand clenched in Rex's fur, and the dog immediately shifted, pressing his weight more firmly against her leg. The subtle movement grounded her. "Yes." The word was barely a breath. "Can you tell the judge what would happen when your dad got angry?" Silence stretched across the courtroom. Emma's eyes had gone distant, that dissociative state returning. Her hand moved rhythmically through Rex's fur, but her focus had turned inward to somewhere dark. Marcus Morrison leaned forward slightly in his seat, and though he made no sound, something in his posture shifted. A subtle assertion of presence, of power. His mother grabbed his arm, whispering urgently, but he shook her off without looking away from his daughter. Judge Chen noticed the movement and felt her jaw tighten. She had seen this dynamic before, the silent intimidation, the wordless reminder of who held control. She glanced at the bailiff, who had already straightened, alert to the potential disruption. On the witness stand, Emma had stopped speaking entirely. Her eyes were fixed on her lap, but Judge Chen could see the girl's chest rising and falling too quickly. Rex had gone completely still beside her, his entire focus on Emma's face. Rachel Tanaka took a step closer, careful not to crowd. "Emma, honey, I know this is hard. Would you like some water? Or we can take a break." "He hurt me." The words erupted from Emma in a sudden rush, louder than she'd spoken all morning. He hurt me, and he said if I ever told anyone, he'd make sure I never saw my friends again. He said nobody would believe me anyway because everyone knows Hez a good man and I am just a kid who tells stories. The courtroom seemed to exhale in unison. Several members of the gallery shifted uncomfortably. Marcus Morrison's lawyer placed a warning hand on his client's shoulder. Rachel nodded slowly, giving Emma space to continue. That must have been very frightening. I tried to be good. Tears, finally, spilled down Emma's cheeks, her voice breaking. I tried so hard to not make him mad, but he always found something. And Grandma, she didn't know, or maybe she didn't want to know. She kept saying I needed to be more grateful, that Dad worked so hard to take care of me after Mom left. Emma, Rachel said gently, can you tell the judge specifically what your dad did that hurt you? This was the moment, the testimony that would determine everything. Judge Chen leaned forward slightly, and the court reporter's fingers hovered over her steno machine. But Emma had frozen again. The tears streamed silently down her face, but no words came. Her breathing grew ragged, and Rex shifted from his lying position to sitting, pressing his shoulder more firmly against her leg. Sarah Coleman rose from her seat against the wall, concerned. She had seen Emma shut down before, during the forensic interviews. The trauma was simply too large, the fear too deeply embedded. Sometimes, despite all the preparation and support, children simply couldn't find the words to describe what had been done to them. Emma, Judge Chen said softly. Her judicial authority gentled for this moment. If you need more time. Emma's hand moved. It happened so quickly that most people missed it initially. Her left hand, which had been resting on the arm of the witness chair, made a small, deliberate gesture. 3 fingers pressed together, then separated, then pressed again. The motion repeated twice more, hidden from most of the courtroom's view but clearly visible to Rex. The German Shepherd went rigid. His ears shot forward and a low, rumbling growl began deep in his chest, not aggressive, but warning. His body shifted from supportive companion to protective guardian in an instant. Sarah Coleman's eyes widened. She recognized that signal. It was one they'd practiced with Emma during their sessions at the Advocacy Center, a way for the girl to communicate when words failed her. 3 fingers together, then apart. The sign for help. Me. But Rex's reaction went beyond their training. The dog had risen to all fours, his body now positioned fully between Emma and the defense table. His hackles had begun to rise along his spine, and his gaze, those amber eyes that had witnessed so much suffering, locked onto Marcus Morrison with an intensity that made several people in the gallery lean back instinctively. Judge Chen sat forward, her hand raised to call for order, but she paused. Something was happening here, something important. Miss Coleman, the judge said sharply, is your dog alerted to something? Sarah had moved to the witness stand, her combat instincts and her training with traumatized dogs merging into a single moment of clarity. Your Honor, Emma just gave Rex their emergency signal. Shez non-verbally communicating that Shez in distress. Rachel Tanaka turned to Emma, crouching slightly to meet the girl's eye level. Emma, sweetheart, can you tell us why you gave Rex that signal? Emma's voice came out small and terrified, her eyes locked on her father. Because Hez doing it again. Hez looking at me the same way he does before he... She couldn't finish, but she didn't need to. Judge Chen's gaze snapped to Marcus Morrison. The man's expression had remained neutral, but his eyes held something cold and controlled, a warning directed at his 8-year-old daughter even in the middle of a courtroom. Mr. Morrison, Judge Chen's voice cut through the tension like a blade. You will look away from your daughter immediately, or I will have you removed from this courtroom. Marcus Morrison's lawyer quickly whispered something urgent in his client's ear. Slowly, deliberately, Morrison shifted his gaze away, but the damage was done. Everyone in the courtroom had seen the dynamic, the silent control, the intimidation that required no words. Judge Chen turned back to Emma, her voice softening again. Emma, I want you to understand something very important. Your father cannot hurt you anymore. Do you see this? Courtroom. All these people. We are all here to protect you and to hear your truth. Rex knows this, which is why Hez protecting you right now. You are safe. Rex's growl had quieted, but he remained standing, vigilant. Emma's hand was still buried in his fur, and slowly, incrementally, her breathing began to steady. He would wait until Grandma went to bed, Emma began, her voice stronger now, as if the judge's words had unlocked something. Then Head come to my room and lock the door. Head say we needed to have a talk about my behavior. But it was never just talking. The floodgates opened. For the next 40 minutes, Emma testified with heartbreaking clarity about years of physical and emotional abuse. She described being hit with a belt, locked in closets, deprived of meals as punishment for minor childhood transgressions. She described the careful way her father would check her arms and legs afterward, making sure marks would be hidden under clothing. She described the threats, the isolation from friends, the constant message that she was worthless, burdensome, lucky to have a father who tolerated her at all. Throughout her testimony, Rex remained vigilant beside her, a steady presence that seemed to lend Emma his strength. Several times, when her voice would waver or her breathing would quicken, the dog would lean against her leg, and Emma's hand would find his fur, and she would continue. Marcus Morrison's expression slowly crumbled as his daughter spoke. His lawyer frantically scribbled notes, preparing objections and cross-examination strategies, but even he seemed to understand that the case had shifted dramatically. The grandmother had begun sobbing openly, her tissue shredded in her lap. When Emma finally finished, the courtroom sat in stunned silence. Judge Chen removed her glasses and set them on her bench, her eyes bright with emotion she couldn't quite contain. "Emma," the judge said, her voice thick, "you are one of the bravest people I have ever met. Thank you for your courage in telling your truth." The defense attorney stood for cross-examination, but his heart clearly wasn't in it. He asked a few perfunctory questions, trying to introduce doubt about Emma's memory or possible coaching, but Emma's testimony had been too detailed, too consistent, too obviously genuine. After less than 10 minutes, he sat down. Judge Chen called a brief recess. As the courtroom emptied, Sarah Coleman approached the witness stand where Emma still sat, her hand resting on Rex's head. "You did it," Sarah said softly, kneeling beside them. "You were so strong, Emma." Emma looked down at Rex, who gazed back up at her with those wise amber eyes. "He knew," the girl whispered. "When I gave our signal, he knew exactly what I needed." Sarah nodded, understanding the profound bond that had formed between this traumatized child and this traumatized dog. They had both been broken by cruelty, both learned that humans could inflict terrible harm. But they had also both learned that healing was possible, that trust could be rebuilt, that loyalty and love could transcend the damage. "Rex understands," Sarah said simply. "Has been where you are." When court reconvened, Judge Chen's decision was swift and unequivocal. "Based on the testimony I've heard today, I am finding probable cause to proceed with all charges against Marcus Morrison. I am also ordering that all parental rights be immediately suspended pending the outcome of the criminal trial. Emma Morrison will remain in the custody of Child Protective Services, placed with her current foster family." As the judge continued outlining the conditions of Morrison's bail, including a no-contact order with his daughter, Emma leaned down and wrapped both arms around Rex's neck, burying her face in his fur. The German Shepherd remained, perfectly still, accepting the embrace with the patience of a creature who understood that sometimes love was simply being present for someone else's pain. 3 months later, on a clear autumn afternoon, Emma sat in Janet Rivas' backyard watching Rex chase a tennis ball that Sarah had thrown. The adoption papers had been finalized that morning. Emma was officially Janet's daughter now, legally and permanently. Marcus Morrison had taken a plea deal, unwilling to face a trial where his daughter's testimony would be public record. He would serve a minimum of 8 years, and his parental rights had been permanently terminated. Emma's grandmother had sent a letter, an apology that would take years for Emma to fully process. Shed claimed ignorance, but Emma remembered the sounds that must have traveled through the walls, the marks that must have been visible, the questions that were never asked. For now, though, Emma didn't want to think about any of that. She watched Rex return with the ball, his tail wagging, and felt Janet's arm settle around her shoulders. "As happy," Emma observed, watching the dog's playful energy. "So are you," Janet replied gently, "or you will be. Healing takes time." Emma nodded, understanding that truth in a way most 8-year-olds never had to. Shed learned that telling the truth was terrifying but necessary. Shed learned that sometimes the strongest thing you could do was ask for help, even if you had to do it in silence, with nothing but a hand signal and faith that someone would understand. Shed learned that broken things could be repaired, that trust could be rebuilt, that love didn't have to hurt. Rex dropped the tennis ball at Emma's feet and sat, panting happily. Emma picked up the ball and threw it across the yard, laughing as the German Shepherd bounded after it. Sarah Wood stopped by for a visit, stood nearby with Janet, watching the scene with satisfaction. "Has been certified for therapy work," Sarah mentioned. "He'll help other kids now, the way he helped Emma." Janet smiled. "Emma wants to do that too someday, help other kids who are scared to speak up." Sarah nodded, unsurprised. She'd seen this transformation before, how victims could become advocates, how survivors could become warriors for others. Emma would carry scars, certainly. The nightmares wouldn't disappear overnight, and there would be hard days ahead when the trauma would resurface unexpectedly. But she wouldn't carry those scars alone. She had Janet now, and a community at the Advocacy Center, and a network of support that would help her build a life beyond what had been done to her. And she had Rex, a scarred, graying German Shepherd who understood better than any human could that courage sometimes looked like 3 fingers pressed together in a silent plea for help, and that the most powerful thing in the world was choosing to trust again after trust had been shattered. As the afternoon sun stretched their shadows across the lawn, Emma called Rex back to her side. The dog came immediately, settling beside her on the grass. Emma's hand found the soft fur behind his ears, and they sat together in comfortable silence, 2 souls who had survived the darkness and found their way back to the light. In that quiet moment, Emma understood something profound. She'd been afraid that telling the truth would destroy her family, but instead, it had led her to the family Shed always deserved. "Thank you," she whispered to Rex, though the words encompassed so much more than the dog could know. "Thank you for being there when I couldn't speak. Thank you for understanding my signal. Thank you for protecting me when I couldn't protect myself." Rex leaned against her side, his presence warm and steady and utterly reliable. In the end, it hadn't been grand speeches or dramatic confrontations that had saved Emma Morrison. It had been 3 fingers pressed together in a secret signal, witnessed by a dog who had been trained to recognize suffering because Head survived it himself. It had been the simple, profound truth that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is ask for help, and the greatest gift you can give someone is letting them know they're not alone. Judge Margaret. Chen would later tell colleagues about the Morrison case, about the moment she'd seen the German Shepherd respond to a child's silent signal, and understood that justice sometimes spoke in languages beyond words. She would remember Emma's courage and use it as a reminder of why she'd become a judge in the first place, to give voice to those who had been silenced, to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Rex would go on to work with 63 more children over the next 4 years before retiring to live permanently with Sarah. Each child he helped carried away the same lesson Emma had learned, that healing was possible, that speaking up was worth the fear, that you could survive the darkness and still find light on the other side. And Emma Morrison would grow up to become a child advocate herself, working alongside facility dogs just like Rex, helping children find the courage to give their own secret signals, to tell their own truths, to reclaim their own lives from those who had tried to silence them. She would tell them what she'd learned in that courtroom when she was 8 years old, that sometimes the hardest thing and the bravest thing are exactly the same, and that you are never as alone as you feel, even when words fail, even when fear overwhelms, even when the darkness seems absolute. Because somewhere, someone is waiting to see your signal. Someone is ready to stand between you and danger. Someone will believe you when you find the strength to speak, and that makes all the difference.